Well, we are going to see the Ohio State Buckeyes compete for a national championship after losing to Michigan for the second time in the last 3 years. This would be unthinkable to somebody that's out there that might be 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, or however old you are. Anybody older than basically me, this is unthinkable. And even to me, this is kind of unthinkable that Ohio State or Michigan could lose that football game and still go on to compete for the national championship. But yeah, we've seen it 2 out of the last 3 years. But with the 12-team playoff, we knew it'd be inevitable. How do you respond after an emotional loss like that? Not only did you lose to Michigan, and that was one of your primary goals of the season, but they also ruined another one of your primary goals, which is to win the Big Ten. And they ruined that, take you out of Indianapolis, and now out of your 3 major goals, you only got 1 left. That's the type of pressure that this senior class and Ryan Day is facing over at Ohio State. Meanwhile, over at Tennessee, you're playing with house money. You have a sophomore quarterback in Nico Iamaleava. You have belief that next year you guys will be just as good, maybe even better. Maybe losing some parts on defense that they have to be able to replace, losing some pieces on the offensive line that you have to replace. That might be a concern going into the offseason, but ultimately the confidence is that the young quarterback, Nico Iamaleava, will continue to develop and continue to get better. After all, we've seen him continue to get better this year. In the last 5 games, 11 touchdowns to 1 interception. He's been playing more efficient, more effective. And in the very last game that we saw, they played on the road at Vanderbilt. And after a slow start, Tennessee had their biggest offensive explosion against a Power 4 team, or sorry, I should say conference opponent, even though I still don't think, despite the 51 points that they put up, even early on against NC State, that wasn't an offensive takeover. That was more like a defensive takeover in the offense, capitalizing off of it. This Tennessee team, though, played probably their best football of the year against Vanderbilt. A lot of people could argue that it was the Alabama game. I think that was their best game on defense for sure. But I don't think that Tennessee offense was still fully clicking up to that point. I thought it was a very ugly football game just based on where those two teams were at that point in time. But Tennessee seems like a completely different team offensively now than they even were then. Because, see, even if Georgia did beat Tennessee, the way that Tennessee started in that game and showed moments against a really good team against Georgia, in Georgia on the road, which is going to be a if not more difficult environment than what they're going to face on Saturday. It's got to give you optimism that Tennessee has it in them to be able to be a very dangerous team in this college football playoff. But for Ohio State, you know you got the roster. You know you got the guys. You got NFL guys. If you look at any draft board right now, they have 3 or 4 first rounders, albeit one of them not playing in Josh Simmons. But they're going to have first rounders this year, by the way, in guys like Jack Sawyer and Donovan Jackson, who looks like he could be the first guard taken, and Emeka Egbuka. They have a good corner as well who might not crack into the first round, but still is going to be a second-day pick in Denzel Burke. They have a lot of talent. They also have a lot of young talent. One of the best freshman wide receivers I've ever seen in the guy on the screen right there in Jeremiah Smith. Caleb Downs, the best safety in America, is on Ohio State's side as well. So Ohio State has the talent edge against basically anybody that they play the rest of the season, because a lot of people will agree and make the statement that Ohio State has the most talented roster in America. So what is it going to come down to for Tennessee to be able to pull off this upset? There's a major matchup that nobody's really talking about, or just a stylistic matchup that nobody's really talking about that Tennessee has a major advantage in. It's the run game on offense, not on defense, not getting stops on Ohio State. I think Ohio State will get theirs offensively in this game, and more on that in a second. But the big thing that I'm going to be looking at here is I have seen with Ohio State struggle against teams that spread you out but are effective running the ball between the tackles when they spread you out. And that's what Tennessee does. Dylan Sampson's one of the best running backs in America. I would argue he's the best running back in the SEC. He's a really good player. And their offensive line is real tough. Now, I think that with Selden entering the portal, they're going to have a little bit less depth there. So being able to lean into Dylan Sampson as a workhorse, it might bite them in the next game against the Oregon Ducks if they were to go on and win on Saturday night in the Horseshoe. But for sure, you got to think that they're going to be able to pound the ball with Dylan Sampson and try to force Ohio State to bring a safety into the box despite spreading them out. Leave those corners on islands so you can hit on big plays. That's what Oregon did to have success. And to a lesser degree, we saw that run game with the spread wide splits have success with Marshall and Indiana as well against this Ohio State team. The one thing I feel like Jim Knowles has not fully figured out as a defensive coordinator is defending that style of offense, the wide splits. And I think that that's going to be a very, very dangerous game that we're going to see with Tennessee. And I'm predicting right now that Dylan Sampson is going to have roughly about 150 yards rushing on about 25 carries. He's going to have a pretty big day. I think he's at the very least going to be a 100-yard rusher. I'd be shocked if Tennessee doesn't win the rushing battle, because when you flip the field and you look at the offensive side of the ball for Ohio State, right now there's a lot of talk in Columbus going on with their offensive line because of the way that they got pushed around against Michigan. Now, albeit the game plan was pretty bad, and I'll also give you this. Nobody's really going to push around Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham all day. That's why Texas used perimeter run. That's why Oregon used perimeter run and getting the ball out to the athletes to just wear down that Michigan interior. Ohio State did not do that. They didn't recognize that on film. How they didn't recognize it on film, but this random kid sitting here in this chair was able to recognize it before the game, makes no sense to me, but they didn't. And at the end of the day, it wasn't the fact that Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant won that battle. It's that they dominated that battle. Integra Shabola continues to look like a major liability on the offensive line. And by the way, without Seth McLaughlin, without Josh Simmons kicking Donovan Jackson out of position to tackle, the interior of this offensive line is wearing very thin. And what Ohio State's going to need is straight up Luke Montgomery to be an absolute dog when he hits the field. If he gets out of the field, he needs to give the coaching staff a reason for him not to be pulled off the field. Because Integra Shabola and Austin Searveld, have both given these coaches reasons to take him off the field, and they have not had the confidence in the guys below him. Now it sounds like they're having confidence in Luke Montgomery, and they're talking about a rotation with guards, which I hate, by the way. If you think Luke Montgomery is passing up these guys in front of him, don't be rotating them. Go with the starting two, and if they struggle, take out that kid for a couple of possessions, a couple of drives. I think it's really that simple for Ohio State to try to fix this. It was either that or starting a brand new center and Josh Padilla and kicking Hinsman back out to guard. And that worked very well for them against Penn State. So I think that this offensive line, handling Tennessee's defensive line, is definitely going to be a concern. Now, Tennessee's not going to be able to do what Michigan did against Ohio State. Michigan's defensive line is indeed better than Tennessee's. They don't have the edge rushers, the stars that Tennessee has, and in particular James Pierce, who everybody's going to talk about. And I frankly don't know how in pass protection Ohio State's going to be able to protect Will Howard against James Pierce. I think James Pierce, similar to Abdul Carter, will get his. But you never really felt like a guy like Abdul Carter really took over the football game. But you did feel like with Ohio State in this offense, the two games they struggled most on offense was Nebraska, and you felt Hutchmaker and Ty Robinson in that game. You felt against Michigan in the worst offensive production that they had, Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham take over that game. They don't have that duo in the middle like Nebraska even did, but certainly not like Michigan had. So it's not like Ohio State's not going to be able to have success on the offensive line against Tennessee in the interior with some reps. They're movable in the middle. It's the edges you got to worry about. So perimeter run, the same strategy they should have gone with against Michigan, is probably not the strategy you go with here. It's a lot more multiple here than it probably should have been against Michigan, even though it wasn't really multiple. It was horrible, and everybody saw that. But the other emphasis that this Ohio State coaching staff has put on this week is getting the ball out to the weapons, recognizing they did not do a good enough job of that against Michigan. I think the big thing, though, is Tennessee. They got a pretty solid secondary back there. They're not going to be the easiest to get open on. I would actually argue Tennessee's got a much better secondary than Michigan had. And you would not test Michigan's secondary. The question really is going to be, does Will Howard go and win the game for Ohio State, in my mind? Will Howard's going to have to go out and win the game, going to have to do enough. He's going to have to throw for 300 plus, I think, to win this game. I think it's a bad matchup for their defense to where Tennessee is going to be able to control the tempo. I think Tennessee will have times where they speed it up and slow it down. I don't think they're just going to be on this giddy up bunny type of pace. I think they're going to be on and then off, on and then off. And they're going to lean on that offensive line. They're going to lean on that run game. And I think they're going to have success doing so. I think that Ohio State's red zone defense is going to also keep them in the football game. Because it's not like Tennessee's red zone offense is absolutely deadly. They have not been. They've been held to field goals a good amount. If you had to ask me how I think this game is going to play out, I think early on we get a couple of stalemates on both sides of the offenses trying to feel each other out. But in the second quarter, you start to see Dylan Sampson wear on this Ohio State defense, but you're also going to see Ohio State make some plays. I think Ohio State will probably be up at the half 14 to 6, holds Tennessee to a couple of field goals. Tennessee scores the first touchdown in the second half. They're going to score a touchdown, kick the extra point, go conservative, 14-13 there. And then I think Tennessee is going to take the lead with a 14-16 go-ahead field goal. We get into the fourth quarter, and I think in the early fourth quarter, you're going to see Ohio State be able to make its mark. They're going to go down the field throwing the football. Will Howard's going to come up big and take Ohio State on a go-ahead touchdown drive to go up 16-21, and Ryan Day will play it conservative and kick the extra point. A lot of Buckeye fans will argue about that. And then I think Tennessee is going to respond touchdown with a touchdown, and they're going to take a decent amount of time off the clock too, and get that game down to the last 3 minutes. And I think Tennessee is going to score a touchdown, 2-point conversion, 24-21. Tennessee leads. Ohio State fails on a fourth down late in the game, and Tennessee wins the ball game. Or Ohio State misses a field goal late in the game. That's possible too. Tennessee is going to win. I know I did that, which is completely different, but this is literally how I just see the game playing out in my mind. And I'm just vocalizing it, and I could be completely wrong on this, but I just see that game flow going, kind of back and forth like that, swings of momentum. And Tennessee gets the last swing of momentum. The pressure is felt on that last drive in the horseshoe. And at the end of the day, no matter how Tennessee gets a stop, I think they're going to get a stop when they're up by 3 late in the game. And I believe that Tennessee is going to go into Ohio State and pull off the lone first-round upset and beat the Buckeyes 24-21. Thank you guys for tuning into this video. I really appreciate it. Make sure you guys like, and if you've made it that far, consider hitting the subscribe button that's about to pop up. I'll see you guys in the next video. Enjoy the college football playoff this weekend, and have a Merry Christmas if I don't see you before then.